You're listening to Sirens, a true crime podcast, brought to you by the Sirens Network. This podcast contains explicit content, so listener discretion is advised. The opinions expressed on this podcast are solely the views of the hosts and do not reflect the views of affiliates, associates, or sponsors of this podcast. This is Sirens, a true crime podcast.
Hi, how are you? First of all, I want to introduce our listeners. Today we're actually going to talk about your mama, Karol Summerville Butt, and you are Brooklyn Nicole. Tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Oh my gosh, I don't even know what to say. Oh, this is so intimidating. No, it's really not. I grew up in Oklahoma, moved around a lot. Also grew up in Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin.
Oh, wow.
And my mom was murdered when I was little. And
you were how old? 7?
I was 6. Yeah,
6.
I was almost 7. It was like 2 months before my 7th birthday.
Oh.
Yeah. And I sadly remember a lot of it. But then I grew up and I started talking about it on TikTok, and that's how you guys found me.
That is how I found you. Because I follow a lot of Oklahoma stuff and obviously true crime on TikTok. And I saw your stories and I just consumed every bit of it. As I was like, this is not real. There's no way that this is something that's happened.
When I started doing them, they had a 90-second limit.
Right.
When I started the TikToks. This was before you could go 3 minutes. Now you can go 10.
Yep. Oh, wow. Yeah.
People got really upset that I did it in so many parts. Oh. And I'm like, I'm not re-recording these.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not doing it. It was hard enough to do it the first time. But I do feel bad because I feel like a lot of people have to listen to me explain, do my first 15 seconds over and over and over and over again when they're binging it. But it is what it is. So I do get that a lot. You should have made it longer. I was like, that didn't exist when I did this.
Yeah. And like you said, it's hard enough to talk about. Wasn't that the first time that you really came out to the public with any of this?
Yes. A lot of my friends and stuff over the years have known and everything like that, but I've never done anything super public with it. I never put it on any social media other than that. And it actually started out as a really morbid joke that I told on TikTok. And then people were like, oh, we want the story. And I was like, okay. And then I did it. And then it blew up in one night. And I had no idea what was happening. I went from 12,000 followers to 700,000 in one day.
Wow. Yeah. Was it therapeutic for you at all? Did you feel better after you did it, or did you have some regrets? Or
I was panicked at first because I wasn't used to that amount of attention being put on my trauma, I guess.
Yeah.
I wasn't used to being recognized. I started getting recognized in public a little bit, I think because of the algorithm. And, I live in the middle of nowhere in Indiana. So, but people started recognizing me a little bit, which kind of threw me off because I was like, oh, man, you know a lot about me.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about you.
Yeah.
And that panicked me a little bit. But actually talking about it was kind of a relief thing. Even my family and friends were like, you never told me this part or this part. And I was like, well, I don't know what I've told you. I've just told you bits and pieces over the years, but to sit through. And it was nice that from now on, when I date someone, I don't have to be like, so here's the story. I can just be like, watch this, and that's a big deal. Cause having to explain it to people that come into your life and become close to you over and over and over again is kind of rough. So now it is kind of a relief to have it all out there and to have so many people understand and just believe me.
Yeah.
Is, huge, because I had friends that were like, I thought that, there was a trial. I thought there was, and I was like, no, absolutely not. There was none of that. So it was nice for people to be like, wait, this is really messed up. And I was like, yeah, I've been saying that for years, but you didn't know the details. So it is kind of a relief, but it was a panic moment at first, for sure.
Well, has it gotten easier? When did you start doing that? It's been a couple years now, hasn't it?
Oh goodness. Yeah, because I made that joke when I lived in Louisiana, and I've lived in Indiana for 2.5 years.
Oh, wow.
So it's been a minute.
Yeah.
It's been a while. It blew up over Thanksgiving, I think 2 years ago.
And is it getting easier for you to talk about it now that it's been?
100%.
Yeah.
It's been way easier.
Well, and that's also, a coping mechanism. I mean, even though, you've kind of put yourself out into the public, it still inside kind of helps you be able to cope with it a little better. It is a coping mechanism.
Yeah. Work through it a little bit.
Because it brings it out and you're not compartmentalizing it in your, in your mind for years and years and years, which you already did. I mean, it looks like for a long time. And so you finally got it out, and that actually is healthy coping, the way that you've done. So.
Yeah, and I started therapy, which helped.
Yeah,
that's good. That's good.
But I pretty much had to, after it blew up, I was just panicky, and I was like, okay, this isn't going to go well. I need to figure out how to cope with everyone knowing about it now.
Well, and then the second part of that is, what is he going to do? Were you ever afraid that he would come after you?
That is a very real fear of mine, because I do know he's seen it, and I only know that because members of his family have messaged me and told me that he's seen it, but I don't know anything other than that, and it is terrifying. I've been very much like, oh goodness, what if he comes here? I bought a house, that's public record. Like, I don't know. It's not hard to find me, unfortunately. Like, so I do have a cop that lives across the street.
That's
so
nice.
That has been very helpful.
Really
and
nice.
I have cameras everywhere and like all, but at first that was a very real fear. My safety was a very real fear. But now, and my family was very concerned as well about my safety when it first happened. Now things have calmed down a little bit. I'm still very vigilant and like aware of my surroundings now.
Good.
More so than I was at first. Like I have 2 dogs and I walk them at night, so I have to be aware of what's going on. Even though I live in the middle of nowhere, I have to be.
Yeah.
So, it's just kind of weird. I'm always like a little bit on edge, but I have really good neighbors that all know that if anything's weird, like I have one neighbor, if someone parks in my driveway, he texts me.
Oh, that's
good.
nice.
That's
yeah.
good.
And, it's just really nice because I live in a very small town. It's got like 200 people. So everyone's kind of on the, just aware that, and they don't even know the situation. I don't think most of them, but they do know like, hey, she might have someone after her a little bit. So if you see anything suspicious at her house, call somebody.
Your viewers are going to be really into this today because we get to sit down and talk about this unabridged and let you tell your story. No stopping, no having to scroll or do whatever to the next one. We're going to talk it all out as much as we can get into it. So, starting with, you guys did not live in Oklahoma. Do you know why you moved to Oklahoma?
No. My dad finished residency and he got a job there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he got a really good job offer there. So they were kind of in a doctor drought, from what I understand. Like they didn't have a lot of doctors in that town, and they offered him a really good amount of money, so he took it and they moved there.
So this would have been around 1992 that you guys moved to Oklahoma.
Correct. I was 2.
There's something that happens with a newborn at a hospital like a year later.
So as far as I know, it was a malpractice suit where the baby died.
This event actually took place in 1993, but the suit didn't come about until 1995. So and this was just all in the stuff that you gave us. So I found this where a 5-month-old was admitted to Jackson County Memorial Hospital with gastroenteritis and possible pneumonia. The parents were told to bring, apparently this baby had an apnea monitor and didn't bring it to the hospital. Were told to go get it. Mom leaves to go get it, but apparently this baby was put in a room that was really far away from the nurse's station. No one was monitoring this child. The dad was in there, but like no nurses, doctors, nobody was in there monitoring this baby. And the baby had a cardiac event. I'm not exactly sure what kind of event. I don't know if it was due to pneumonia and it caused an arrest or whatever. But apparently what happened was this dad witnessed this arrest and nobody was around. And he was like running around screaming and asking people to like get a nurse, get a doctor, get a something. And like just no one was around. He finally found a person who cleaned the rooms, wasn't even a nurse, and was like, please go find me somebody, ran back to the room and began CPR on this 5-month-old on his own by himself. And then
at the hospital.
At the hospital, yes. Yeah, eventually this woman who was this housekeeper went and found somebody. I'm not sure exactly who she found, but finally got people in there that took over CPR. They did get a palpable heartbeat. Apparently, it was a while that he was working CPR on his own and took them a while to get this child back, and he suffered severe brain damage, which then led to his death 2 weeks later. That is what apparently this child was under Michael Butt's care, which is your father. And that's where the suit came from, that he should have been monitoring this child a little closer. So I don't know exactly if this is the first. I'm just guessing this is probably the first of the troubles that kind of start to follow him around. I know this was kind of lingering over during the next couple of years because it happened in 93. So 94 and 95, like those 3 years was probably like very stressful for your family.
There were some money troubles during that time, which that would track if there was issues with the cases, because I know that we ended up moving to the country from, like, they had built a house in the city that was really pretty and my mom loved it, and they ended up moving to the country to an old farmhouse and remodeling because another doctor, my dad was like, I never have money. Like, how do you make money as a doctor anymore? And they were like, tax write-offs, you need to have a farm. He bought a farm and my mom remodeled it. And that was all during that time period. Like, we moved in when I think I was 4 or 5. So that was happening too, just so that they'd get tax breaks and be able to save money. I mean, it was a gorgeous house, but like I mean.
Yeah, I saw pictures. You have some photos of the house on your TikTok that I saw, and it was a pretty large, nice house.
Yeah, it was really nice.
It says on this timeline that you guys moved to the country in mid-1994.
Yes, and it was almost done, I think, remodeling when we moved in, so that's about right. Yeah. I remember the remodel, and I remember going out there, and my fifth birthday was March of 95, and we were in a rental. And the only reason we were in a rental is while they were remodeling. So they probably bought that house in 94.
Okay.
And we didn't move in until 95. No, I remember, I have weird memories like that where I'm like, no, I know my 5th birthday was at the rental house. So I know that they probably bought it in 94, moved in 95, because I know that my 6th birthday was not at the rental anymore.
Yeah. And then in later 94, we have the first sexual misconduct allegations against Michael, where there was an underage, not super underage, but I think she was 17 at the time, alleged that he did some stuff to her while under his care. And so that was a whole new thing. Yes.
So I remember the first time that CPS came to talk to us, I was 6. They pulled me out of 1st grade.
Oh, wow.
It was 96. It might have been 95, first semester, but it was 1st grade. It had to be 1st semester. My mom was still alive. So 1st grade. So it had to be within 6 months of November of 96. That's it. It was a few months before she died. It was 3 months before she died.
Yeah, it was not long before she died.
No, it was 3 months before she died. I found out about it because CPS came to the school, pulled me out. I went to the principal's office, and they spoke to me, asking, showing me dolls, asking questions. as they do.
Yeah.
I didn't understand what was going on. And then my mom ran in because I guess somebody had called her and told her that they were pulling me out. And she ran in before they got my sister. I believe they got my sister out, and because my sister was in kindergarten there, I was in first grade. And so they pulled her out after me and did the same thing. But my mom got to sit in the office at least and wait for her to come back out. That was the first time I knew something was wrong. And then the next day or so, they came to the house. And I remember they came to the house, like some detectives came to the house, not CPS, but detectives came to the house because they knocked on the big front door. It was a blue door, and nobody used that door. We all used the kitchen door on the side of the house. And so the fact that somebody came into that door and sat in the red room, which was a super fancy formal dining room or living room situation, but I was like, oh no, they sat in the red room. Something's going on. You know, we weren't even allowed in the red room. So it was just a room with red walls, but it was a fancy, very
like a little foyer sitting room or whatever.
Yes. And it was like super fancy stuff, like Fabergé eggs and stuff.
Oh my gosh.
We're not allowed to touch. So we weren't even allowed in there or the formal dining room. Honestly, we weren't allowed in any of it. And we were like, what's going on? And I remember my mom telling my older sister to keep us upstairs.
Oh, wow.
And so that's when like we stopped being invited to things a little bit. And I remember like people, like I would go to my friends' houses and their parents would be talking about it. And I would kind of catch on, but I don't think they understood that I was catching on. So that's mostly what I remember is people like a lot of hushed whispers, and then like they'd stop talking when we came around, you know, and like that's when stuff like that started happening. But that was the extent that I knew about it. I knew that my dad was in trouble for something.
Yeah.
I didn't know what. And then he disappeared for a little bit.
Well, I was about to say by September of 1995, you have the sexual misconduct allegations, and you also have the malpractice suit happening where he is like actively going to court for the malpractice suit and actively being investigated for the sexual misconduct stuff.
So when he disappeared for a little while, did he just go on a trip somewhere?
Did he tell you guys or just leave?
He left. It was right before Christmas, my mom's last Christmas. My mom didn't know where he was. He just left and started driving to Alaska.
Oh my god!
Which I'm sure when you're something like that's going on, you're not allowed to leave the state. So
he got picked up in Canada and shipped back.
So he actually was going to.
Wow.
He went across the border.
Wow.
He did. He got picked up in Canada, I guess. I mean, from what I've read and what I understand, that's what happened. And like from people telling me, I don't remember that part. I remember wondering where he was. And my mom kept saying he'd be home at Christmas.
It says here that it was the 20th of December when he got, I guess, a traffic ticket in Canada, and that's when they...
Yes.
Yeah. There were rumors, though, right, that he had a girlfriend in Alaska.
He did. I know her.
Oh.
So, he did. She's
They're not
great.
rumors.
Love her long time. No, I do know her. She was underage.
There it is.
I think she was 17 at the time.
Wow.
So
he thought he would just go up there and hang out with her while all this was going on, I guess.
Seems like it. That seems to be the case, yeah.
So then he is charged in 97 with this. He is actually charged with the sexual battery of that underage patient.
He really didn't concern himself with his kids until after my mom died.
Oh.
Like we didn't really know him very well.
That's so sad.
I have a few memories of like going to the hospital to visit him and stuff like that. But for the most part, he really wasn't around much. And when he was, he'd just kind of like go off and do his own thing. He was he wasn't interested in anything that a 4 or 5-year-old girl was interested in. So he never was really around until after he had to be, you know? So, and even then that was few and far between. He just hired people to take care of us, or he just dropped us off at people's houses and didn't come back for weeks at a time. And like, you know, he'd tell them like, oh, like 1 or 2 days. And then he'd be back 3 weeks later, and they'd have to like buy us clothes and things like that. Cause he didn't pack anything. Like he just kind of wasn't really involved with our lives when we were little. So I don't remember anything behaviorally. He was just, not around.
Yeah.
I mean, really at all for us.
Do you remember maybe how that affected your mom?
Not really. I know that she was more stressed around the time that happened, but I only really know that because her friends have told me that, and they've told me like what she was going through more so, and that she withdrew a lot more and stopped hanging out with people as much and stuff. And I do know like my family said on the phone calls and stuff, they had no idea any of this was happening. My mom kept it very close to it. She didn't even tell her brother. She told no one.
Yeah.
Any of this had gone down. She didn't tell him about the malpractice suit. She didn't tell him about the sexual battery charge. Like, she told no one anything. I do remember at one point we drove in the middle of the night to my grandma's house, which is in Indiana, from Altus. And we got there, and my grandma and her got into a fight. And she put us right back in the car and drove right back.
Oh, wow.
And that's like a 12-hour drive. I don't know what that was about. No one in my family knows what that was about at all. But I remember it very vividly, and like no one knows why they fought. No one, and it was around that time. So, but in general, I know that she was keeping it very close to the chest, which has to be really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Was your dad known to be, domestically abusive to her? Do you think that's why, I mean, before this happened, do you think that's why she kept it so close to her vest? Or do you think that she did it more to protect him because she didn't want anyone knowing? He's
known as like a super charismatic, manipulative person.
So a narcissist, right? Yes.
Mm-hmm. Super, super high narcissist. And like, he's also diagnosed bipolar, and he also believes he has kind of a God complex with the whole doctor thing. He believes he knows better than anybody, so he knows what to take and what not to take. And he's an addict. He's always been addicted to something, and at the time it was prescription drugs. I mean, his behavior was always kind of like hairpin triggered. You know what I mean? Like, he would be very, very quick to get angry.
Volatile.
Yeah, he would lose big chunks of time, memory wise. He didn't remember. So of course he never did anything wrong, because you're making that up. He didn't remember doing it. Mm-hmm. Which is like, how do you make someone apologize for something they don't remember? But she did write a letter in that time, but it was like May of 95. She wrote, her therapist had told her to write everything down, that she, like a journal entry or whatever, and read it to my dad. And it was basically like, I don't think he loves me. I don't know what to do, and she genuinely seemed to have loved him. And like, he suddenly out of nowhere just didn't reciprocate anymore. And it was like, okay, I don't know what happened. And yeah, that's what it seemed to be like. And she was just miserable.
Wow. See, that's very common with a narcissist too, just to cut that love off.
Yeah. And at first, like, people thought that it was a suicide note when they found it. And then they found out later that it was not, because she had written in there, "This is Mother's Day." And my mom died in February. In a deposition later, they were like, hey, was that like the previous Mother's Day? And he's like, oh no, it was like 2 years before. It had nothing to do with that. And I'm like, you just shot yourself in the foot. That's okay, bro. That was like the one thing they thought, which they had, is this letter that she wrote saying how unhappy she was.
Yeah. I did read that letter. You put it in there. I don't know if you remember it. I read it, and I lost it. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, you can ask Mandy, I'm like super empathic, and like, I almost couldn't make it through that letter. I just like could not believe, like, because she seems like such a loving, doting mom and wife, and she's there just trying, like, she's absolutely out of her element.
Yeah, she left everyone she knew. Yeah. Everything she knew.
Like, she didn't have any family, hardly any friends. It almost seems like in that letter, she basically is saying that he doesn't really let her be sociable.
Right.
That
he did isolate her a lot.
Yes.
And that's another sign of a narcissist and a domestic abuse. So that would.
There's even a part in there where she talks about him thinking that she's fat, and we have a prescription list where he himself wrote her diet pill prescriptions.
Yes.
And it's like, this woman was like between 110 and 120 pounds, like her whole life.
Just beautiful.
And she's like 5'8".
Yeah. How could you possibly think that you're fat? How could you possibly think you need to take these diet pills?
Well, I mean, he had a 17-year-old.
It's a control factor.
Well, it's control. And when you have someone like, 17, you want everyone to look like they're young. And
that's another thing that she mentioned in that letter, was that she literally said, I don't know if it's because I'm getting older and he likes younger. And there's so many red flags in that letter that you're like,
right. And like, that's why she initially wrote it, I guess, is because her therapist was like, hey, this will be a good exercise for you. And then read it to him. And I guess his reaction to it was just, okay. I remember when I hit puberty, when I was like 14, 15 years old, I went from a size 1 to a size 3 in junior's jeans. Mm-hmm. And my dad told me, you need to be back in a size 1. You don't look good.
Wow.
And I'm like, at what point am I supposed to look good for my father?
Yeah. Yeah.
As I got older and was in therapy, I'm like, that's really messed up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
I
have a question about your older sister.
Yes.
She's not biologically Michael's, right?
Correct. She's her dad. Yep. She's from my mom's first marriage. My dad was her second.
Now, did he raise her though?
They met when she was around 8.
Okay. So she was quite a bit older than you guys, right? Is there a big age difference?
Yeah, it's like 9 years.
9 years.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So
I think
that
it's
was
like 8.5 for me, 9.5 for my little sister. Yeah.
Okay. So I was just kind of wondering where that
and
gap
then you
was.
and your little sister both are his, right?
Correct.
Okay. We were just kind of wondering how big that gap was between you.
Was she already out of the house when this happened?
No, she was 15.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
She was there. Yeah,
wow.
She was there when I can't really speak to what she went through, but like I do know we've talked about it a bit, and like all of my memories are exactly the same as hers. Mm-hmm. Like that mine line up with hers about even that night and stuff. We remember a lot of the same things. So I know that people are like, well, she was only 6 years old. And I'm like, yeah, but my sister was 15 and she was there too. You know what I mean? Like, so, and she remembers what I remember. So, I mean, obviously she remembers more, but.
So we're going to move to the night of, if you're ready for that.
Sure.
Okay.
Let's go.
It's February 8th, 1997. Yes. Now, again, all of this stuff has been happening. He has actually been arrested at this point, released on bail. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. And so then the night of, what I'm going to describe what I found in the documents, and then you can tell us what you remember and recall from that night, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, so we actually found you had the 911 transcript in there, which as a previous 911 dispatcher and someone who listens to a lot of 911 calls, that 911 call had a lot of red flags. A huge red flag, actually, because there's really no point in me even reading the transcript, because it was basically like, 911, what's your emergency? Address. What's your emergency? Address. Correction of the address. What is your emergency? And he literally says, quote, gunshot wound to the head, as if it is like the driest, like he's at work, like he doesn't know this person, like it's so clinical, and he literally hangs up. Like, it's not like my wife, she did something, or she's been shot, or oh my God, there was no distress. It was just gunshot wound to the head. Okay, and then after that, after he hangs up, there's some discussion between the dispatcher and the sheriff's department. Where do we go? What do we do? I don't know. He didn't really say, this is where we're going. Stuff like that. So when they arrive, I'm guessing EMS arrived first.
Yes.
So they get there. They basically take his word for what happened. It's my understanding that he was allowed to wash his hands and his face.
No.
A woman did it for him.
Yeah, that's what I was
Oh.
going to say. The EMS or someone, paramedic did it.
Yeah.
That did it for him.
Did it for him?
Yeah, that's
Did
what
it for him. Washed his hands for him.
that's what it said. And then he wanted to actually get up and go wash his hands in the sink because he still had red around his cuticles, and
I'm like blown away right now.
the police officer, that Mike guy, said, no, you can't do that. You need to sit there. But they had just washed his hands in front of him, so I don't know.
See, and this is a question you probably don't know the answer to, but I'm wondering because some of this stuff I had seen somewhere, I can't remember where I saw it, where it gave me the impression that Dr. Mike was at some point the EMS medical director.
Yes, he was. He was
Okay.
their boss.
Because it
There
did
you
say that one of the EMS workers did say she had worked with him for years before.
Yes.
So this
He
explains
was their boss.
why they immediately took his word for what happened and did what he asked them to do, because literally he could have revoked their license. I mean, he literally could have
He was in
taken
charge of
their
career.
livelihood. Yeah. And so, of course, if you show up at your medical director's house, even if it's a previous medical director, you're going to do what he says because you don't want to lose. I mean, especially if you're younger, you have a family, whatever, you're going to do what he asks you
It's
to
a
do.
massive power dynamic issue.
Yeah, it really is.
It really is.
I mean, people don't really understand how high up the medical director is, because my husband's paramedic and he has medical director here. They literally have to ask him for everything. Like, no matter what they do, if they do something, if they give any sort of advanced life, any sort of medication, whatever, they always have to call in and check and go, is this what I want to do? Is this okay? Like, it's a constant thing. And he controls their continuing education. He controls their medical license. He is the end all be all. So I think it's very important here that we make sure that that's established, that people realize, yes, there are things that EMS should have done differently. I understand that there's so many things here that is wrong, but your literal life is on the line. And if you get your license revoked, that's it. You're done. You can't provide for your family anymore. So it's kind of a big deal that this guy is the medical director. That's a huge factor in this, I think. But it makes me wonder if he actually knew the doctor who did the autopsy.
Oh, yeah, they were friends. They were
There you go.
neighbors.
There you go.
He was a neighbor of ours.
Huh.
Oh, yeah.
See?
They usually all know each other in communities like
But
that.
there
especially.
was somebody else that did an autopsy, I believe, a medical examiner for the state that came in and did an autopsy who did not know them at all.
Was that the
and-
Choi, the Choi guy?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
okay.
yes. Did not know.
I actually think that was a woman.
Yeah, I think so too, but I don't know. But she did, and she was the one who said, like, it's undetermined.
Right.
But yeah, the medical examiner on site at the time, like the one that came in initially, because somebody was there that night, a medical examiner was there, and a local one, and he was like a neighbor of ours.
Wow. I understand. Like, I get it's
Like-
it's small town Oklahoma, but it's like, at what point do you go, none of you should touch anything? We need to get, like the state investigators in here or someone else who's non-biased,
But we've seen this in a
I-
lot
we
of
have,
cases
but-
in the 90s
I
and
know.
early 2000s where this went on.
I know.
They did call the FBI and get them, or not the FBI, the U.S. OSBI. Oh my gosh, why can't I say that? The OSBI. They called them, and they came in and took over.
Well, that's good.
Because
at
they
least.
were like, there's too many conflicts of interest here. And that was one of the first things they did, because the district attorney was also there on site that night. He
Oh.
came to the house.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
and
odd.
It was bizarre. But his brother was my dad's business partner.
Oh my
And
God.
so he had recused himself from the other
cases.
other
Right.
cases.
I did see that. Yeah. I just didn't know the connection.
So when this happened, he was like, "Oh, we need to get somebody else here." And so, because he's too connected to everybody, so they did get the OSBI in, But from what I understand, by the time they came in, everything had already been erased, basically.
Yeah.
Like there was nothing it was a mess already. And there had been multiple people in and out of the house and like all kinds of stuff. So
Let's just say, so what he claims happened, what Michael claims happened is that they took some sleeping pills, that they drank a bottle of wine, that they were going to, quote, get frisky, and then out of nowhere, she pulled a gun on him, put it in his mouth. He apparently hit her hand and the gun away
Jerked
from
his
him.
face away. Yeah.
She fired the gun, so the gun went off once, and then she immediately turned the gun on herself, placed it in her mouth, and committed suicide. He then pushes her off because she was apparently on top of him on the bed. He apparently pushes her off into the floor.
With the gun.
and then places the gun by her hand.
Yeah,
Places the gun
that to
by her
me,
hand.
I was like, there's no way. Like that, why would you go, oh, let me put the gun in the floor by you?
But there's also no blood on the bed.
So and there's a lot of things here. But so this is just what he said. And then we get the 911 call. So you have the EMS showing up, washing his hands, which is a big deal because gunshot residue, right? The easiest way to tell if you're on the edge of, was this a suicide, was this a homicide, who pulled the trigger? You will have GSR on the hand of the person who pulled the trigger. Well, we did see in some of the reporting and the depositions and stuff that no one ever tested her hands.
No one.
That he flat out denied having a GSR test done on his hands.
Yes. Yeah.
After they had been washed.
Correct.
Well, what is going on here? All of this took place before, like you said, before the OSBI was even called in. So there's nothing to collect anymore.
Well, and the second EMS worker I noticed said that he remembered her hands were really, really white and they didn't have the blue. And I was thinking about that because I was like, that doesn't make sense with her having any, kind of residue or anything on her hand. I mean, like, there's something weird about that.
They did say her hands were very, very white and that her body temperature was very, very, very low by the time they got there.
Which
indicates she called later.
Right. Yes, that's why I'm like, there's something about this does not make sense. Like, this is not...
It definitely suggests that she lay there for a while and got colder before he called 911. Yeah.
Yeah, and it says something like 3 or 4 hours or something on one of the depositions. I don't remember which one. I don't know if that timeline's correct or not.
Yeah, because that was the thing that I looked for on the 911 transcript. I wanted to see what time the call came in, but it's actually not on the transcript. So I couldn't see when the call came in. However...
It was
between midnight?
12:30 and 1:30. It was around midnight. That was always the issue because everyone's like, when did she die? Did she die February 8th or February 9th?
Right.
And it's literally different dates on different documents.
Yeah.
Because it was around midnight.
That's what I saw around midnight. It took them about 10 minutes to get there.
Yeah. And
less than 10 minutes.
I think on the autopsy report, the one that I ordered anyway, her official time of death was like 11 p.m. It was 2,200 hours.
Which would still be, even if it was 11 p.m., you're still talking about after midnight when he called.
Well, because you have an uncle, Brent. Apparently, a call came in to him at 2 in the morning. He's asleep in his bed with his wife. He gets a call from Michael at 2 a.m. saying that she just killed herself in front of him, that... This is so graphic, but I think it's important because he's her brother. So he says to her, I tried to do CPR, but when I blew in her mouth, the air came out the back of the gunshot hole. And I'm thinking, why on God's green earth would you say that to her brother?
Who is her best friend.
And didn't know until this point that she was even dead. And this is how you're going to tell him? Like, everything he says is so callous and so like clinical, and that right there almost seems like he was being over dramatic in a way. But then you have a statement in there from Brent, and he said, "What do you mean she's dead? I just talked to her." Apparently he had called that night.
He talked to her that night, yeah.
At 9 p.m., they had like an hour and a half long conversation, got off the phone around 10 or 10:15, just talked to her. If her time of death is 11, and he got off the phone with her at 10:15.
He's on Eastern time too.
Oh,
okay.
Brent's on Eastern, sorry, and I'm on Eastern, so Brent's on Eastern time.
Interesting.
Oh,
I don't know if that changes where you're going with it, but
it changes the timeline for sure. So Eastern time is an hour ahead of us. Is that right?
correct.
So it'd have been one here.
No,
right?
they're an hour ahead of us. So
they're an hour
we would have
ahead
been
of
an
us.
hour behind. So it would have only been, well, if
It
it
would
was
have been 1 when he called.
Right.
And
1 a.m.
1 a.m.
It would have been, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
1 a.m. his brother's
Yeah.
time.
So
Yeah.
if he said that he talked to her and got off the phone at 10, then it would have really
was 9
been
o'clock.
9 here.
Yeah,
Okay.
9 here. So that's not really that late.
It's not that long though.
No.
From her time
I
of
was
death.
still awake when they got off the phone.
Wow. See that
So-
just, and he said in there, he said, I just talked to her. She's making plans with me to go meet up in Springfield, for me to send some pictures, like all these plans that normally people who are suicidal, especially in the next hour, they're not going to make plans. They're not going to be happy and chipper like he described her being, like in a good mood and laughing on the phone and stuff like that.
Well, a lot of people that, end up committing suicide, like Kurt Cobain, I always, because it's a perfect example of you get to a point where right before you do get kind of happy. Because you don't care anymore. You get to a place where you just do not care and you're just happy about everything, but you don't make plans for the future.
Right.
You become nonchalant about everything. You just don't care. You're happy.
Right.
It doesn't matter. You're just, it's just, and so.
But she was adamant about sending those pictures, about meeting
Yeah,
up.
so-
I haven't seen you in forever. Let's do this thing in Springfield. Like,
you become detached, but you become very, you don't care about anything. People are like, oh, they're happy. They seem, happy with life, but they don't let you in on anything else. Like
Right.
they pretty much cut you out of everything except what you see on the surface.
especially plan making. Like they're not gonna, they
No.
don't make plans
No.
with you.
He also had plans for the next day
Yeah. It
that
just,
she had made that day.
See, so that is a huge flag for me.
well, it is. And I just wanted to clarify that just in case
Yeah.
someone says, well, people are happy
Oh, for
when,
sure.
but that's a different type of happy. It's
That's
a different type of,
Mandy's psychology.
but it's a different
Professor
type.
coming out.
It is, because I've had people be like, oh, well, this or this is enough of a reason for her to have done that. And I'm like, I understand that. It really is enough of a reason. Like, I understand that, like no reason stuff, but I understand that people feel like it is, and that sucks. Like they feel like there is no way out, and there's no other option. But I'm like, that wasn't the case here. Some people think I'm just like holding on to this. And I'm like, but actually look at it. It's not.
No, I don't see it as,
Well, you wouldn't so that would have been if what he said was true, like was saying what he said was true, then she would be trying to commit familicide, which was him and her. And
Yeah.
and so that's totally different. That is a
right.
That's
You really
totally
expect
different.
her for kids to find them.
No,
Yeah, that's
I just
different.
don't see.
way.
Most women don't think that way. Most women, when they plan stuff out like that, it's usually, let's do this where I will send the kids away, and like that's not how it happens usually.
I mean, anything is
Men don't care.
Anything is possible, but normally
Right.
things like this
Right.
happen because someone feels like they're up against a wall and they
Right.
they have no choice but to control the narrative because that's their last resort.
Also,
Right.
I did not see anything in what you gave me that indicates that he did in fact try to do CPR. I don't think he actually did.
He did not. But he did say that he did.
Right. He told Brent that he did, at least in his statement. So again, it almost seems like he's overcompensating with his story with Brent. And I think he knew that he had to do that because best friends. He's going to know, right, if something's off.
Yeah.
So
she had a lot of prescriptions leading up to this.
And I'm just going to, I mean, this isn't something our listeners know, but I'm just going to come right out and say it. So I've had a couple sleep studies, and in my sleep studies, I woke up 267 times the first time and 300 something times the second time. So I take Ambien to sleep, have for quite a few years. So I'm very familiar with the effects of Ambien, and I'm very familiar with how much you can take. You have to be very careful with Ambien. So the amount she had in her system,
In the toxicology
you
report.
could not be standing up. You would not be.
I used to take Ambien.
Oh, you did. So you wouldn't be mobile.
Yes, and it became too not strong enough for me, so I had to go to Lunesta. And so now I take Lunesta, but I'm on sleeping pills. I know the amount that it takes to knock someone out.
Right.
Yeah.
Which the amount she had, was outrageous.
It's lethal. The amount she had was
it's
lethal.
outrageous. And there's no way.
Well, and this is the other thing. They're very regulated. So if she would have taken that many,
even then,
she wouldn't have been able to get any more until it was time for her to get more.
Well, and my thing is, if this is her prescription list, sleeping pills are not on it. So whose Ambien was it? And he admitted to Brent that he took sleeping pills that night. So I'm guessing it was a prescription he had himself.
He had bottles of pills all over the house that were not prescriptions. He brought them home.
Oh,
so
Lord.
I don't know. And I know that he used to put stuff in our drinks for us to sleep longer. He used to put
what?
And when we would go on road trips and stuff, he would just knock us out.
Oh my God.
So that they didn't have to wake up or deal with two little kids being like, oh, I have to stop, I want to stop or whatever. They'd knock us out and drive through the night.
So knocking his family out is nothing new here.
Wow.
Nothing. There's a history. Everyone knew that he was doing that. I mean, he'd just give us Benadryl and stuff, but he'd just mix it into drinks and stuff. So we wouldn't. And there was a history of it. Everyone knew that he did that. That's not a secret. And he used to laugh about it. He'd be like, yeah, we used to do that to you all the time. It was not a secret. So for the record, everyone's that thinks that he wouldn't have slipped something into her drink. He had a history of doing that.
And he gave her a bottle of wine.
Who were tiny. When I was 6, I weighed 36 pounds. I was a very small child. And
Well,
that's just horrible.
I should also say that Ambien pills are very, very small. They're tiny. And so they would be very easy to put into a drink and dissolve, and you wouldn't know because they're so, or even ground them up. I mean, they're just tiny. It wouldn't take anything to do that.
no.
So I want to just go ahead and say what was in her tox report. So she had chlorzoxazone, which is a muscle relaxer in her system, which again, not
to knock you out.
Yes, I mean that's enough right there because she had 5.8 mcgs per ml. So, and to still be in your system when you have an autopsy report, that's saying something because your body, even though you die, your body's still going to continue to metabolize and break down and stuff like that. So that number is not the same number as when she actually died. It's going to be higher than that when she actually died. So to see these huge doses in her blood at a tox screening, however long it took after her death, is insane to me that no one flagged this.
Well, and if these are pills and not, these are pills and these aren't shots or whatever, which they're pills, but I'm just saying it takes a while for those especially Ambien, it takes a while to get in your system. It's not automatic. That would have still had to have time to show up in her system to take effect. I just, that Ambien, because that's, some of those medicines take a while. So that makes me think even more that she was deceased before the time said because the toxicology.
Yeah. Yeah, she had 60 ng per mLs of Ambien in her system, which...
Wow, 10 is the most you can take.
Which, man, I forget. So I went and asked my husband to look at this tox report. He's a critical care paramedic, and he deals with prescription medications. And so I was like, tell me what the normal dose of this is. Tell me what this is. Help me translate these mcgs per ml and all this stuff. And I forget what he told me exactly. I think he told me that is something like 25 milligrams of Ambien.
The most you can take is 10.
Is 10, right.
10.
Yeah.
Don't quote me because I'm translating.
Well, no, anything over that.
When I'm trying to remember what he said here.
Anything over that can be lethal.
But he did say something like it'd be like 3 times the dose of...
You wouldn't remember anything. You wouldn't be able to walk. You wouldn't be able to even
on
function.
top of a muscle relaxer?
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to function. You wouldn't be able to put a gun up to someone and hold it to their mouth.
No.
You wouldn't have any coordination of that.
And on top of the alcohol as well, because you're not supposed to mix Ambien with alcohol.
No,
or
it's
like muscle relaxer. And it would not have been good.
Like, she had 0.07% alcohol, 0.08% in her blood.
Which some of that could be...
So that is right under the legal limit of where you would get like a DUI.
But some of that alcohol level, do you think some of that is...
It could, some of that alcohol level could be, the body does produce ethyl alcohol when you are deceased. It does produce some.
But it's obvious she had, there's some wine somewhere. But something.
There's wine somewhere.
Yeah.
And she had wine.
If it were me, I'd have come in there, I'd have been like, nobody touch anything. Let's get somebody else in here. Get me that wine bottle. I want it tested.
Or the glass.
Get me the glass.
There
I want it
residue.
tested.
Yeah.
Test his hands for residue. Like, there's so many things that I'd been like, you do this, you do that, you do that. Get this. Like, there's so much evidence I would... Because I have talked to several homicide detectives. I think even Gary told us this once, where he said, and the death investigator, my little death investigator friend said...
Little death investigator.
My little death investigator friend says that they treat every death as a homicide until it's confirmed that it's not.
Yeah.
Whether it's accidental or suicide or whatever, they come in and everything is a homicide until it's no longer a homicide.
But we've seen them release scenes where there's still dead bodies. In Oklahoma. The families had to come in and literally they had been walked on.
Yeah.
So yes. So that really happened. And so
and to look back at her prescriptions, that I will promise you, the doctors, you see several names on here, including him. He did prescribe her some things, but there are several other doctors on here that prescribed some certain things. I would bet you that they were influenced by what he would tell them. And I will also bet you that he would probably tell her not to tell that doctor what else she's taking, because he's bringing stuff home and he's writing her prescriptions that, as my husband said, no doctor in their right mind would prescribe together. There's a prescription for Darvocet on here, which is
pain medication,
a narcotic pain medication that apparently could make you suicidal, but not just suicidal. It would make you like crazy state, like unable to think of consequences, as in, there's a pin right here. Let's see what happens if I stick it in my eyeball. Like that sort of suicidal. Like he wrote me a list of things that can happen on Darvocet. With heart failure, hallucinations, hyperactive, panic, psychosis. Like there's a million different things that could happen.
But with the combination of Ambien and alcohol, it's going to be a downer, not an upper, and it's going to make you go into a sleep. I mean, they give, in surgeries, conscious sedation, they give Versed, and a lot of times they'd give Darvocet, or something like that to make them sleep.
None of these prescriptions were in her system, according to this toxicology report, but we are seeing a history of what he's been doing to her, basically.
Well, to make her maybe pass out, go to sleep every night. I don't know.
I asked my husband, like, why would you prescribe Darvocet? Like, what was it prescribed for? Because now it's literally the FDA took it out of, like, you can't get it anymore. In like 2010, they were like, you cannot prescribe Darvocet anymore because it was a narcotic pain reliever. It was like comboed with acetaminophen, so it was kind of a catch-all.
That fall, she had her gallbladder out.
Okay.
Yeah.
And she had surgery that fall, and I don't know when exactly.
She had her gallbladder surgery.
I love that you know. Yeah, no,
Six
it was just before that.
6 of 96, and then this Darvocet was prescribed 10 of 96.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's good to know, because I'm like, I don't know, but I'm like, it could have been that, but I don't know. I genuinely don't.
It could have been in relation to that. Darvocet was more like from what I understand, like a bone sort of thing, where it was like muscular.
They tried to give it to me when I had, because I have rheumatoid arthritis, have since I was 15, and I got really bad after my daughter was born, and they tried to prescribe it to me because I got tendonitis and couldn't feel my legs, and then I got really bad bone pain because like all of this was like coming back to my body, and I refused it because I won't take pain medication.
Darvocet was insane.
But that was my daughter's 20, so that was a long time ago when but that could be because, I mean, I literally, it was hurting in my bones because of my arthritis, just literally down. And so, but I refused it.
I do want to bring this up real quick because you said that he had an opioid addiction.
Correct.
Okay. So I'm wondering if Darvocet was not prescribed to her in order for him to take it, because I will say that Darvocet was also used to treat opioid dependency. Just want to throw that out there.
That would not surprise me, because he was very particular about what people knew that he was on.
Right.
So, I mean, because that was a big deal, right? Small town pharmacy is going to know what you're on, and that would not surprise me at all. I remember when I was younger, when I was like a teenager, he wrote a prescription for me when he didn't even have a license.
Right.
It was for Prozac.
Oh, wow.
And it was for him.
So there's your history.
He wrote it for my name to get it. That's a whole thing he did when I was, and he didn't have a license. He just had an old, and he's like, nobody's going to check. And nobody did.
Yeah. Yeah. Just
but
saying.
He could write it for himself,
Right. So I'm just throwing that out there into the world. I do see that he did prescribe her a bunch of diet pills. Now these diet pills you can no longer get because they're insane.
Fen-phen, I think.
That was Fen-phen, which they won't prescribe anymore.
Yeah. And now they'll do phentermine, but
phentermine.
But they won't. Yeah.
Phenterdex or something. It's like
she was on.
Or something like that, yeah.
She was on 2 different diet pills and 1 sedative.
So I do know, like, the diet pills will make you awake.
Yeah, they can make you stay awake, and then you take
and then you take the pills
to go to sleep, but not that many.
It was
no. And I can say I was on phentermine for a while.
Yeah,
and so for a while I would like take it to wake up, and then I would take Lunesta to fall asleep.
Yeah,
and I was like, what is going on?
Yeah,
it felt very whack. I have PCOS, and it was like a whole thing. They were trying to regulate my hormones, and so it had a purpose, but it was a temporary time frame, and so I knew when it would end, and so I wasn't that concerned about it. But I was like, it's bizarre. I feel like I have to take a pill to wake up and a pill to fall asleep.
That's Elvis Presley syndrome. I'm just saying that's what he ended up doing. That's
what Judy Garland did too. So it felt bizarre to me because I was like, I don't know, this doesn't feel right. And my doctor was like, it's like for 2 more weeks. Deal with it.
Yeah.
Okay. And then it was fine.
What's insane?
I was fine after that.
The crazy part to me though about what he prescribed her was he would prescribe her 100 pills at a time for pretty decent milligrams for the diet pills. They
won't do that.
We've got on 710 he prescribed her 100 pills, and then 100 pills of the sedative at the same time, right? And
I'm surprised the pharmacy filled that for 100 pills.
And then only a couple of months later, she gets another 80 pills of the diet pill.
Yeah, they wouldn't do that now. They won't.
No.
They won't. They'll do 60, I think, is the most. Some of them will do 60.
Well, you can't even get Fen anymore.
No, so but some of them will do, the phentermine at 60 pills for 2 months, but you have to come back to the doctor. Like, you can't just keep getting them filled. Like, it doesn't work.
Yeah, they won't even let them prescribe more than 3 months at a time of that. Without another prescription.
Yeah. Right.
Like, without a fresh prescription, because the heart issues that it causes.
Yes. Yeah. And here's what my husband wrote down for me for Fen. Cardiac dysrhythmia, heart failure, respiratory failure, seizures, cardiac arrest, death, you have to be very particular in how many, how much, how long, stuff like that. Right. And even then, it was still causing so many issues that the FDA was like, we can't do that anymore.
Oh, I had a friend, I'm not going to say her name, but I had a friend that ended up being in the hospital a long time over that, and was in part of that whole lawsuit thing because, she had a lot, permanent damage. It was really sad.
What drives me crazy is that as a doctor, you should know all of these side effects. You would witness them in your supposed loved one and continue to make her take them because her being, quote, skinny is
very important.
Right, is more important than her actual health and safety.
No, her being skinny and young looking mattered more.
And these would have affected her mentally as well. Some of these things, like the Darvocet, you've got hallucinations, psychosis. He knew, he would have to have known these things. And
she wasn't taking them and he was.
That's why I'm saying I think that he prescribed those for himself. Or got them for himself.
Surprise me. I mean, that would not shock me one bit.
But this prescription list definitely shows you sort of a history of what he's likely to do and how he's likely to do it.
Growing up, I saw him lose giant chunks of time. Mm-hmm. And I saw him go from 0 to 100 real quick. And I saw a lot of things that someone not on something would never behave like that.
Right.
Right.
So tell us what you remember from that night.
So what I remember, it actually starts a few days before. We went to Oklahoma City to the mall a couple days before this. And there was a guy painting little figurines. This is relevant, I promise. There was a guy painting little figurines in a kiosk at the mall. And they were little teddy bears sitting in these little chairs. And you got to pick your color, and then he wrote your name on it. And we came back and got them. We picked them out, and I wanted a blue one with pink polka dots.
Aww.
That was what I wanted, was a blue chair with pink polka dots, and I wanted it to say my name. And we came back and got them, and they were wrapped up for us.
Aww.
So we left. And when we got home, mine was pink with blue polka dots, and they'd spelled my name wrong.
Oh, no.
And this was a big deal to a 6-year-old because her little sister got one that was right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I was upset. And my mom's like, we will go get you another one. We will go get you another one. So every day I was asking her, when am I going to get my new one? Mm-hmm. And that day I'd been like, when are we going to get the new one? And she was like, in 2 days, we will go get you a new one. But tomorrow we have plans. And I didn't know what the plans were until I grew up. And one of our family friends contacted me and told me that we had a play date scheduled for the next day.
Oh, really?
They were coming to our house.
Oh, wow.
To have a play date. And then my mom had set it up.
Oh, wow.
So I'm like, not only did she make plans with other people, she made plans with me to get my figurine fixed.
Yeah.
Man. And that was a big deal to me. Like, I was asking every day about this. And I was devastated because in my head I had it pictured. It was perfect. And I just remember that was like the end of the world to me as a 6-year-old, that my little bear figurine was not correct. And so that night I remember her getting off the phone with my uncle, and she was like, oh, I want to show you guys stuff. And I was like, okay. So we went into her bathroom and I sat on the edge of the tub, and she was on the floor in her bathroom, and my sister, one was to the left of me on the floor, And then it was a pretty big bathroom, and there was like a water closet, kind of like where the toilet was, where you could shut the door. And my big sister had that opened, and she had the toilet seat down and was sitting on the toilet seat because there were not a lot of chairs in that bathroom, right? So she's sitting there, I'm sitting on the other tub, Lauren's on the floor, my mom's on the floor, and she's pulling out all of this stuff to show us. And it was like jewelry of her mom's, and her mom's letter from like cheerleading, and it was like my grandmother's stuff, who died when my mom was 8.
Oh, wow.
So I had never obviously met her, but something about this phone call was like my mom was going, and she was like actively going through it and explaining all of it to us and showing us everything. And this later on became a big deal to me because my uncle and I were talking, and we were kind of like, man, I wonder if she was going to leave, because she was getting out this stuff that actually, like, she was dinging it out from like in boxes in the back of the bathroom. Like, she was finding stuff that was important to her and putting it together and, you know, putting it in safe places and stuff like that. So I'm like, that's when my dad came home that night.
I do want to mention that she did, in her little journal write-up, she did mention leaving at one point, and she did mention there at the end that he didn't like her, he hated her, whatever, wanted her to leave, but then would always make up with her because she thought he was worried about her taking his money. And so there were a lot of little flags here and there that suggested that she did want to leave.
And he was in a good mood when he got home, and I remember that. And then as soon as he walked in the doorway and saw what we were doing, instant anger.
Wow.
He was like, instantly, everyone go to bed.
Oh, wow.
And it was late, and he was just like, I remember him yelling and being like, why are they awake? But he had been fine 5 minutes, 5 minutes before. We could hear him pull up, and we were like, oh, like, we're in here, like, whatever. And he came in instantly angry.
Wow.
And we went to bed. I don't remember much about that part, like going to bed, but I remember I was awake. I was reading. I had a flashlight under my pillow and a book, and I was waiting for my mom because she always slept in my bed because I was a sleepwalker. And so she would usually like spend time with my dad or something and then come up to bed. So like and she would always try to make me fall asleep before, and I never would. And it was like a whole thing because I never went to sleep until she came up there. And I was always afraid that I was going to get hurt because they had told me all these stories about me sleepwalking. Oh. And so I had this big fear of going to sleep with no one being there. And I was like, I know, like, I'd ended up on the counter at my grandma's house, like, who is my great grandmother, like, making cereal. I'd done, like, all that kind of stuff. Like, they'd find me under the kitchen sink. They would find, like, there was just, and I used to, like, go around and turn on all the lights in the house. Yeah. And she'd just follow me and turn them off, making sure I didn't fall, or something like that. But anyway, point is, she slept with me every night. And that was like a non-negotiable. It was like for my safety. So that was not something that like, oh, she just decided not to. That's not the case. She did every single night. And if she didn't, my big sister did, because they knew someone had to be in the bed with me. It was just not safe for me to be by myself. Yeah. So I was waiting for her to come up, and she wasn't coming up, and it was taking her like a lot longer than normal. Like, I'd read a lot. Like, all I could think of was like in chapters, and I'd read a lot. And I was like, something's going on. So I went downstairs and I knocked on the door to their bedroom.
So their bedroom was downstairs and all of your bedrooms were upstairs.
Correct.
Okay.
I did read something. Sorry to interrupt you. I read something that your younger sister was sleeping on the couch.
We don't know.
Okay,
because
so that was just...
remember that.
Okay.
And my older sister doesn't, and my younger sister's like, absolutely not. She went to bed upstairs.
Okay, so I don't know.
We don't know how she ended up downstairs.
Okay.
And she wasn't when I went down there.
Okay.
She was not on the couch when I went down there. So like, I had passed the couch to get to my parents' room, and she was not on the couch.
Okay.
And that was not something like our parents really, I mean, we were pretty disciplined children, like, because appearances were everything to our family. So like we didn't fall asleep random place. We were always in bed.
Well, again,
like, it was,
that's a discrepancy. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That you see that just right there adds to it. Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're fine. And that's something that like, one of the neighbors have contacted me and said, no, she was there. Your little sister was on the couch. And we're like, none of us know when that happened. Like when she got up and went down there, she doesn't remember it. And she ended up actually like falling off of the seat in the truck when they took us away. She was asleep the whole time.
Oh, wow.
She slept through all of that. And she was a pretty light sleeper. So the fact that she slept through all of that, got put in a truck, fell onto the floor of the truck
and stayed asleep
while he was driving and stayed asleep. Like she opened her eyes and went right back out. So like she would not have walked down the stairs.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know how that happened or if that happened. That's like a thing that nobody really understands because she's like, I was not on the couch. And I was like, we don't remember you being on the couch, but unless somebody in her sleep carried her down there, we don't know what happened.
Wow.
And when I went down there, she wasn't there. And as far as I know, and as far as everyone knows, I was the last person to talk to her aside from my dad.
Yeah.
Because I knocked on the door and she was like, go to bed, go to bed. And I was like, she was being really weird and like not like herself at all and panicky and being like, you need to go to bed right now, go upstairs. And she wouldn't open the door, which was very bizarre. Normally she was very comforting and very, you know, like, oh, it's okay. Like go upstairs, whatever. But I was like, are you coming to bed? And she was like, yes, I love you. I'll be right there. I'll be right there. And like, she kept repeating it. And I looked down, like I got on the floor and I looked under the crack of the door and I could see her feet were right there, but like probably 6 feet behind her was my dad's feet.
So did you think
and I didn't know what was going on.
the gun was already like, there?
Yeah, that's what it sounds like to me.
That's my assumption.
Yeah.
That's my assumption.
Because that sounds like a mom saying,
He was
please,
panicked.
for the love of God, get away
Protect
from me.
your children.
Yes,
She's
protect your
protecting
kid.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she was just, it was just a very bizarre moment because she's not, like, she had never not opened the door to her and not say anything.
Yeah.
Makes me, you know, and so I'm like, okay, that's weird. I went back upstairs and I read some more and eventually I fell asleep. When they brought all the cars in after the call, the lights were all on. Like when the police and the like EMTs and stuff all showed up, the lights were on.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have sirens. None of them had sirens on. And I don't know if what I saw was the ambulance. I don't know if what I saw was the police. I don't know. But my door, I had a balcony door that was a window, right? So the door was a clear glass door. And on my walls, it lit up my room. And I was such a light sleeper that it lit up my room in red, white, and blue. And I was like, what is going on? And I kept saying, the lights were dancing. And no one knew what I was talking about. And I was like, there were lights dancing on my walls. And that's what woke me up.
Can I tell you something real quick about that?
Yeah.
So it probably was the ambulance. It might have been the cops too. But so at least now the protocol, when they call it staging. Okay. So when you get a call that sounds like it could be dangerous, they don't know what's going on. They have no idea what's going on in the house. They'll do what's called staging, where they do show up with no sirens. So they don't alert anyone inside, but usually the cops will try to go in first, and then the ambulance will be a bit back and wait until they clear the house and make sure that there's no threats. There's a real chance that they did show up without sirens so that they didn't alert the neighborhood, because they wouldn't know if he did something or if there was a perpetrator in the house that had broke in, or if somebody had ran across the street. Like, They just didn't know what was going on. So they were probably staged. That's what they call it, being staged.
Yeah. And I thought maybe it was because they didn't know if they were at the right house.
Yeah. And that could be
in the
too.
middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm sure they didn't want to freak people out.
Yeah.
But I didn't know. But I just remember there were no sirens, and that's what woke me up, because everyone's like, how did she wake up? And I'm like, the lights. I woke up from the lights. It lit up my room.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was red, white, and blue. Like, that's not normal, like, for a kid. And I was like, okay, that's weird. And so that's when I woke up and started going down the stairs. And I heard a bunch of people, and I knew it was the middle of the night. I knew I was not supposed to be awake, and I knew I had been told to go to bed like 15,000 times. So I knew I would be in a lot of trouble if I went downstairs.
Yeah.
And so I kind of crept down like the first 4 or 5 stairs just to see what I could see about what was going on. And I did see my dad covered in blood in the living room, and he was just wearing underwear, and he was covered in blood. And someone was washing his hands, and I could not see the couch. I don't know if my sister was on there because the back of the couch was to me. So I couldn't see over the back of the couch to see if she was on the couch. I don't know, but there were people going back and forth in front of the stairs, and my big sister saw me.
You didn't hear gunshots at all?
I did, and I heard them before I went to sleep.
Oh, wow.
So it was before I fell asleep. I heard the shots, and I heard 2 shots, and there was probably a couple minutes between them.
Okay.
Wow.
And I heard 2 shots, but I knew they were gunshots, but I thought that they were further away than they were.
Oh.
Right. And you're in the country. I mean,
and so that was normal. Like it was, and I hate to say that, but like
Hunting
people
and stuff.
well,
stray
yeah,
dogs.
it's the
I was
country.
used to
Yeah.
that.
In Oklahoma, that's just, you hear gunshots
I was
in
used
the
to
country.
people shooting things in the middle of the night. Like
Yeah.
that wasn't a bizarre thing, but I did think it was further away than it was. And it was like a distant shot. It wasn't like what people think a gunshot in the house would sound like, because my parents' whole like wing of their house, like the bathroom, like that was all soundproof.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
They had soundproofed that whole room
Oh.
for my dad, because when he would work overnights and stuff like that, he would need to not hear us being awake.
Right. Okay.
So they soundproofed that whole wing. So like if I had screamed for my mom, she never would have heard me.
Wow.
So that was part of the reason that like she would sleep with me, because when I woke up, they'd never hear me,
Yeah.
you know, and my dad needed, you know, his distance from the kids. He needed to be, you know, it's like have kids for show, but like don't want to actually be around them screaming,
Yeah.
you know, and whatnot. So like that's why it sounded so muffled, and that's why I didn't know where it was, and I didn't think anything of it. I really didn't. Like it took me until I knew she was shot. I didn't even connect it.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Because they'd told me she died before they told me she was shot. So they'd told me 2 stories before that. Then I fell asleep, woke up with the lights, and I don't know how long I was out. I could have been out 10 minutes. I could have been out 2 hours. Like I genuinely don't know how long I was out.
Yeah.
My sister saw me when I was down the stairs and said, go upstairs. Like she was very much, do not come down here. You know, she was like, go upstairs. You're going to get in trouble. You've got to go upstairs. And I was like, why? Like, what happened? Dad, why is dad in blood? I want mom. Like, I don't, you know, and she was like, dad cut his finger. And I was
Wow.
like, that's too much blood for a finger.
Yeah.
And she was like, go upstairs. She didn't know what to say. And like, she, to be fair, just seen her mom die.
Yeah.
So, you know, she saw everything, I guess. So like, I was like, okay. So I went upstairs, and she was just like, you're going to get in big trouble if you come down here. Like she was just trying to keep me upstairs so I didn't see what she saw. So she came up with the first thing that hit her head, which was he cut his finger. Like, you know, I was like, why are all these people here? Dad cut his finger. Like she didn't know what to say. And like, I knew that she was trying to protect me, but I didn't know what from, you know? And like, I know a lot of people have been like, why'd she say that? And I'm like, what would you have said? You're trying to keep your little sister, who you really can't control, from coming down the stairs and ruining her life.
Yeah.
You know, like yours just was. So like, what would you say? So she got me to go upstairs, and I ended up falling asleep after that. And I don't know how, but I think it was probably because I was 6 years old and it was the really middle of the night.
Yeah.
And the next time I woke up, my dad had just turned on the lights, and my bed was surrounded by people, police officers, the neighbors. Like my dad was sitting with his back to them, and, you know, sitting like kind of leaning on the bed and being like, your mom died, you know, and like, your mom's dead.
Was he
And I was like,
crying?
he was fake crying.
Oh, no.
No tears. None. But nobody could see it but me.
Oh, wow.
And I said, how? And he was like, she got hit by a car at Walmart.
What?
That's what he said. And I said, she wasn't at Walmart. She was downstairs. And he said, no, she went to Walmart after you talked to her.
Oh, wow.
Which I would have heard her and I would have seen the lights leave. And I would have known she wasn't coming up to bed. You know what I mean? Like, and she did do that sometimes. She would go to Walmart in the middle of the night because it was 24 hours. And so she didn't have to shop with 3 kids.
Yeah.
I get, you know, like, but then she'd come back and go to bed with me. So like, it was never that late. And I was like, I don't think you realized how long I was awake. I would have seen it. I would have seen her leave.
Yeah.
There was no curtain on that window. Like, and it was a full length door window. Like there was no curtain. I would have seen it. So, and it was the front of the house. She would have had to drive by my window. Mm-hmm. And there's no way. And the second thing I said, I guess, was, then why'd the ambulance come here? If she died at
really
Walmart?
Good question that's a great question. That's very observational.
I don't think she expected that, but I was like, I just said it. I was like, then why would the ambulance come here?
That's a good question.
And it caught him off guard, and then immediately he acted too flustered to answer and walked out, you know, and then the neighbors were like, well, let's get you dressed, because I slept in my underwear when I was a kid. So let's get you dressed. We've got to get, you know, so they just avoided the question altogether.
Wow.
And but the bizarre thing was they never tried to wake up my little sister, but they woke me up for show. It was a big performance, it felt like, because I'm like, why would you we're 11 months apart. Why would you wake one of us and do the whole shebang and not wake the other? You know, and just carry her out in her sleep.
Well, since she was such a light sleeper, do you think that maybe she was given something to make her sleep since she didn't wake up in the car?
She and I both think so, because she didn't even wake up in the car, and that is not who she is. And she didn't wake up until like 10 a.m. the next morning.
Oh, wow.
And when she did, I'm the one who told her.
Oh my gosh.
Because my dad wasn't there. My sister wasn't there. It was just me and her at a babysitter's house. And no one knew what to do with us.
Oh my gosh. So he loaded you guys up and took you to a babysitter?
A family friend did, yeah. And like, that's what he told them to do. And I guess, you know, like, what else are you going to do? We've got to go somewhere. So we went to the babysitter, and then he and my big sister went to the family friend's house.
Why did your big sister not go with you guys?
I think she was being questioned. Yeah. So I think they were asking her questions and stuff. And then she just went to their house. Sleep. So I think that it was more get the little kids out of the house before they see something that they don't want to, you know, they didn't want us to see. Okay. And she'd already seen it. So it was kind of like, okay, get the little kids out of here. But I remember walking down the stairs and a police officer picked me up and carried me outside. And and I remember being like, this is weird, because I wasn't used to being carried because my little sister was around. Mm-hmm. So, you know, as soon as I could walk, she was being carried, you know, because we were so close in age that like, I was not used to being the one that was carried. And I was like, this is weird. Like, that's not nice. Like, it was like I still had no idea what was really going on. Like, but I knew that it didn't make sense that the police would be there, like they were. And so when she told me later, when she woke up, I said, Mom died. Do you want to play Connect 4?
Oh my gosh.
She's like, okay. And we went and played because nobody was paying attention to us. Like, all the adults in the room were talking amongst themselves, you know, and nobody was really around us. And he eventually came to pick us up. And I don't know what time that was, but it was a long time. And he came to pick us up. And in front of the babysitter and the people that were there were more people there than just the babysitter. Like, other family friends and stuff had come basically to converse about it because it was a big deal. And he like got on his knees in like her foyer basically and did that fake crying thing again, which I was like, everyone can see there's not tears. You know, it was bizarre. He like scrunched his face and he was like, I just wanted to tell you that Mom didn't die in a car at Walmart. And I said, I know. And he was like, she shot herself in the head. My little sister started crying, which makes sense. And I didn't, because I was like, it just seemed bizarre. Even as a 6-year-old, I knew something was wrong, you know? And I was like, this is not right. Like, I didn't know what had happened, but none of it made sense. And I knew it wouldn't, but it just still didn't make sense. But that was pretty much the end of my memories for that night / day of what happened.
What happened after? Because you guys didn't live with him, did you? Like you
Yes, we stayed with him till I was 15.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Was your younger sister, and I mean, I can see obviously that you were probably close to your mom because, you know, she slept with you every night. And so you probably, was your little sister closer with, was she close to your dad or your bigger sister, or they weren't?
No, neither of them were. We were all very attached to my mom.
Because he was just not around.
Yeah, and I mean, my big sister had been with my mom obviously 8 years longer, you know, so like she was very close to her, and you know, they'd been through a lot together. And so then before they'd even met my dad, you know, and then like obviously I was close to her, but my little sister and her were also very, very close. My little sister was really sick when she was born. Okay. So she was a preemie, and there were a lot of issues when she was born, and she outgrew everything that she had. Like she'd have asthma and stuff like that, but she's perfectly healthy now. So, you know, like, but, and she was, even at that age, she's been taller than me since she could stand. So that's, you know, and she's like, you know, like we're complete opposites, but, I think that she and my mom had a different kind of bond because of that. Like, you know, they were very, very close as well. So, yeah. Not that I wasn't the forgotten middle child or anything. She slept with me every night. So I'm just saying in general, like we all had our own bonds with her, but it was just her. Like she was our lifeline for everything. I mean, I feel bad now thinking about it. She never got a break.
We do what we got to do for our kids.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't know. It's just interesting now that like, I don't have kids, but like my friends do and my family does, you know, my sisters do and stuff. And I'm like, oh, my mom never got a break. You know, I'm like, no, I cannot tell you. The only reason I knew that when she had gallbladder surgery was because she couldn't take us to something and my dad did. And it was the only time he ever did.
Wow.
It was a school function, and it was like in the summer. It must have been in the summer or something, but I remember it was like early, right before school started. It was like a back to school thing. Mm-hmm. And he took us, and he'd never taken us anywhere.
Wow. And did you know, so after you guys lived with him till you were 15, was it the same type of relationship, just distant?
Initially, we had nannies. We had some long-term, some short-term nannies. And then it was distant. He was never really around and stuff. And he had girlfriends. I mean, immediately, like, I remember when we got home from the funeral, when we got to Indiana for the funeral, he left us there.
Whoa.
Oh, to go see a girl?
Until my birthday. So her funeral was February 14th. So Valentine's Day. He left us there till March 24th.
Oh my gosh.
Oh.
And we were both in school. He just left us there.
Your birthday.
Mm-hmm. March 24th. He didn't come back. They didn't know when he was coming to get us. And my aunt and uncle wanted us. Mm-hmm. And at the time, my dad was like, fine, take them. But then people in Oklahoma were like, man, that kind of makes you look bad.
Yeah.
And you already look pretty bad right now. And so then he's like, oh, then I need to get the kids back.
Yeah.
So I look like a grieving family member, like, you know, a grieving family guy. And like, why would you do this to somebody who's grieving his wife's death, you know?
Yeah.
So, and it was all about the sexual battery charges because, and so that's another reason, like, I have the theory that she was going to leave because if he had told me later on in my life, he's like, if your mom had left me, I would have looked so guilty. And he said that to me. And I'm like, you know how messed up that is?
That's so ridiculous.
So I'm like, that's motive. I'm like, that's motive right there. If she was going to leave, he would rather her die than leave because it makes him look guilty.
That's what narcissists do. That's what they do. They have this mindset of, if I can't have you, even if it's just to control you, then no one can.
Yeah. And like, I mean, he's going to do everything's about perception. So that's what it's going to seem like. But yeah, we had nannies, and he'd drop us off at like family and friends for a long time, and you know, all that stuff. But I remember when we got home from the funeral, that's the night his girlfriend cooked us dinner.
What?
Yeah, and she was married.
What?
And we met her husband.
What?
And he did not know.
Oh
it
my
was a
God.
whole thing. He was in the Air Force. They lived on base. She was a nurse at the hospital.
Oh my
They'd been
Lord.
having an affair for years. And yeah.
Do you think your mom knew about his affairs?
I don't know. I genuinely don't know.
She might have had a inkling, and that might have,
You have to have an idea.
that would
Yeah,
maybe have made her want to leave even more.
But yeah, I don't know if she knew the extent of it,
Sure,
you know,
yeah.
or
Yeah.
because it was a lot of women.
What's
You
the
know.
youngest one? What's the youngest age?
I think
know?
16
Okay.
that I know of that have spoken to me about it. 16.
Good God.
Mm-hmm.
And he was in his 40s.
Yes. And this particular woman was married. And we would go stay at her house sometimes because they wanted us to bond with her.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And they were like, remember, don't tell her husband.
Oh my God.
And so she would just say, oh, this doctor's wife just died, so I'm helping him out by babysitting.
So you guys were living with him when
Yes.
the trial and everything took place for the 17-year-old patient.
Correct. He always said that people were lying about him. He always told us that. And not to worry,
narcissist.
everyone's lying.
That's
Everyone's
a
lying.
narcissist. Yeah.
Typical.
Yeah. And I remember a couple years later, I was like 8 or 9 years old. I asked him about it. And I said, what did everyone say? Because I didn't actually I didn't know. I knew something was wrong. I knew he got in trouble for something. I didn't know what. And he had always said, a young girl is lying to get money from me. That's what he always told me. And then finally I said, what did she say you did? And he had no gauge of what was appropriate for a child.
Mm.
I mean, I watched 9.5 Weeks when I was like 8 years old. Like, this man had no gauge of what was appropriate. And so
9.5 weeks with Kim Bessinger?
yes.
Oh,
That's what
wow.
I'm saying. There is no level of appropriateness for this man. So like, and I mean, to be fair, he just always, for the most part, told me like it was. If he told me like it was, which is something like I at least did get from him. But he did tell me. And I remember we were driving to a park to meet up with the girlfriend from Alaska.
Oh my God.
But this was like later on in her life and stuff. They like kept in touch.
Lord.
And he also called her the night my mom died, for the record. But
What?
yeah, that's like their thing.
Oh
But
my
yeah, he actually
God.
called her that
What?
too, and was like, "Hey, Carol's dead."
No.
And she's like, "It was bizarre." She's like, "Brooklyn, there was no emotion in his voice. He was just very matter of fact, and he laughed on the phone." And I remember him laughing. And that's the same thing my aunt and uncle said, that he laughed on the phone.
Right.
And, you know, and I know that that's a trauma response as well. But I remember her being like, it was bizarre.
But it's also in the 911 call. Like, it's so
Yeah.
matter of fact. Like, it's
Yeah.
just,
It was just very, Carol's dead.
this happened.
Like, and that's what he told me. I mean, your mom was shot herself in the head.
That's so horrible.
So people can be stoic, people can be, crying, people can be hysterical, like, or they can be softly crying, but
then to fake cry in front of all these people
Well,
when you're that way to other, like,
one thing that is not a trauma response is calling your girlfriend the night. I'm just sorry. Like, that takes it out of the
You're
equation.
underage, bro.
yes.
That it doesn't matter like how you say it. The fact that you did it takes away any validity that you had.
I also did see in some notes from Brent, from your uncle, that he heard or something, found out somehow that Michael had also called his lawyer right after calling 911.
Oh, yeah. His lawyer showed up. His lawyer was there.
I did see that. I saw that in the
Was
in the-
there?
His
He was
lawyer was
there?
there.
He showed up.
He
Yeah,
was
I
there.
did read that.
He was there. He was there that night. He was on.
Oh
yeah.
my God. Who?
His lawyer was there.
I'm sorry. That now it just sounds planned out.
Well, okay, but I have seen that where doctors will automatically call their attorneys for anything that happens because they automatically think they're going to be implicated. So he thought probably automatically that he was going to be implicated because they said when they walked in, the paramedics, that he went, "This is my wife, this is my wife," like saying, "I'm not doing anything to her. I'm not doing anything to her." So that, I can see that, where that would be a thing because people, you know, especially doctors, they get sued for everything. They get, you know, I mean, you never know. So I could see that being a thing, but at the same time, you know, the fact that he showed up.
He was there.
The fact that he was there on scene, is a little strange.
He's the current district attorney there right now.
Interesting.
They know.
Oh, yeah. And like afterwards, you know, he tried to kind of throw my mom under the bus because that's his job. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's his job. So it is what it is. But, you know, we spoke about it later. And I mean, he was just doing his job. I don't blame him at all. But it was when he wasn't returning my phone calls and telling me who to go to that I had an issue with him, because I was like, you can't just avoid me because you have a conflict of interest. You have to tell me who to go to.
Right.
You know, like that's your job. When he told me about what happened, he did tell me, oh, you know, this girl, she was in foster care. She was not, she needed money. She was about to age out of the system. And she came to my clinic and she said I touched her inappropriately. And I said, did you? And he said she wanted my money. And years later, when I was a freshman in high school, I got in the car. He picked me up after school and I could tell something was wrong. And I was like, I was a sophomore. Sorry, I was a sophomore in high school. And I was like, what's wrong? Like, say he was off. Something was off. And he's like, this girl who had been a friend of ours when we were little says I touched her. And I said, did you? Because at this point, I'm 15 years old. And I'm like, I know what's going. And I said, did you? And he said, don't tell your sister.
Again, no answer.
And I said, find a place for us to go. You need to find one right now. You have to have a plan for us. Because something, and he's like, nothing's going to happen to me. I said, something's going to happen to you. You're going to go to jail. And because this girl was 7. She was not 17. She was 7.
God.
When this happened.
Oh,
and now
God.
She was a year older than me. She was like 17 when she came.
Is that the youngest person to say to?
Yes,
okay.
to say something.
But still, 7 is young. But I'm just saying.
She was like 7 or 8 at the time. Yeah.
Jesus.
So I was like, no, you've got to come out. And it was a very quick conversation because my sister was coming to the car. You know, like, and it was after school, and so it was. I mean, she probably had to walk a block. So like, it was a very quick conversation. And my dad always said that as I got older, he's like, well, you were just old. You were always older than you were. So he just very bluntly told me a lot of things that, you know, and he'd always say, well, you're my best friend. And I'm like, you need friends. Like, you know, because we weren't friends, you know, I'm your daughter, but I took care of him because he'd go on these drug binges and be out of it and stuff. And I was like, you need a plan for us. Wow. And he didn't have one. And the issue with it was that the person that was supposed to take us if anything ever happened to both of my parents was this little girl's grandparents.
Oh my God.
So that's where I was like, we can't go there. No. Where are we going? You know, like we've got to, nothing's going to happen to you. And so
that's horrible.
He went to sleep for a week. Like he just locked himself in his room for like a week.
That's, ugh.
And the next thing we know, it's like right before Christmas and the police are there, take him away.
Wow.
And we have nowhere to go.
Well, I do want to add in here real quick that 98, so a year, well, it's probably like a half a year after your mom's death, there was the trial for the 17-year-old patient. He did get convicted of that.
Correct.
The dumb part is that he was not told that he had to stop practicing. What he got was 2 years suspended sentence.
He was on the registry until 2008.
Oh, okay.
Oh, really?
So he did get put on a sex offender registry
Oh, wow.
until 2008.
So my question is, if they put him on the registry,
Why did he still have custody of 2 young girls?
why? Okay, so now there's two questions.
Sorry, that's
why
my
would
question.
why would he? Number one, yes. Why would they still leave two small girls in his custody? And number two, so they did. I think this is the one where they gave him the 2-year suspended sentence on his medical license. Why 2 years if you're going on the registry, on the sex offender registry? Like,
Yeah.
I feel like if you're on a sex offender registry, which is like pretty much, I know there's levels, but a lot of them are lifelong.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you leave someone someone's medical license where you could treat people who could potentially be in danger? And I mean, that's just wild to me.
In order to blow your mind a little bit, I don't know if you caught on that he didn't stop practicing when that happened.
No, I did see that.
We just moved to another state and they didn't talk about it.
I saw that.
They didn't check. And we moved to another state for him to keep practicing.
Well, and the order that I saw in his OSCN.net was that was the loophole, was that they just suspended him from practicing in Oklahoma for 2 years.
Correct.
Which means, yeah, he can go across state lines. He can practice wherever he wants. And that, like, I'm like, why is that a thing? You were just convicted. And number one, you got a suspended sentence, was the stupidest thing I've ever heard, which means you're basically just out on parole now. So why are you going to let him cross the state lines to begin with? And he's still practicing.
Yeah, And the reason he was convicted at all was because she wore a wire. That girl was 17 and brave enough to wear a wire and go see that man again and face them. And he apologized to her for it. And that is the only reason that they got a conviction.
Yeah, confession, basically. So it was my understanding that when you guys initially moved to Oklahoma, he had kept his house,
in Decatur, yeah.
Decatur. Is that where you guys went back to?
Not at first. We did eventually go up there. But no, we initially went to Marshall, Illinois, and my dad worked in Terre Haute, Indiana, which is where he had met my mom. So like we basically moved back to where my mom's family
where she was pleading to be at.
Correct, but we were not allowed to see her or see her family or anything really.
Well, of course not. Of course.
Yeah,
not.
We got to see my grandmother, who was my great grandmother. We got to see her and my grandpa, and like my cousins and stuff would come over to my grandparents' house, but he really didn't want us with my aunt and uncle much, because obviously they knew too much about him, but my grandma had made a rule in our family, and everyone stuck to it, that they did not badmouth my dad while we were still there, because she said at the end of the day, they have to go home to him.
Yeah.
And that is very true. Like, it's not, we didn't have a choice. We still had to go back. And I know as an adult, a lot of my family thought I was like brainwashed or something as a kid. And they were like, well, you didn't know any better. You were brainwashed. And I was like, no, I knew better, but I didn't really have a choice. I still had to go live with him.
Were you scared of him growing up?
Yeah. And we would always I remember we would always do this thing where we'd wake up in the morning and kind of sneak into each other's rooms and be like, is he having a good day or a bad day?
That's so sad.
And we would always hide if he was we'd make ourselves scarce if he was and there was a lot of things where when he finally got arrested and stuff, we were basically medically starving. Because there was never food in the house, and now I have a lot of issues with that. I overbuy food. I buy more than I eat because I am so terrified of there not being food in the house. And that's, because there was never food. And we would my sister used to eat Ritz crackers, sleeves of Ritz crackers and I would steal food from school. I would steal cookies because those gave me the most energy, and things like that. So it was really messy. And I used to do this thing where we would like enter codes at school to get food. And I would memorize my friends' codes when they weren't paying attention. And I would buy lunch off of their accounts because I couldn't afford it. Because he always said, I gave you $20 2 weeks ago. What, and things like that. He wouldn't give us money. But that was after he wasn't working and stuff. But anyway, initially we went to Marshall. And he got remarried very quickly. And then he got divorced very quickly after that.
Oh my gosh.
And it was just a very tumultuous thing, very messy. And I think that, at the time, neither of them they weren't not on drugs. So they weren't.
I'm sorry. It's not funny. It's just funny how you said it.
I know.
Well, they weren't not doing drugs.
There was a lot of drug use and that I saw, but she tried to protect us as much as she could, but there wasn't really much she could do. And at the end of the day, she had to get herself out of that and her kids out of that.
Yeah.
And I'm good for her, for divorcing him without losing her life.
Yeah.
Honestly, good on her. For the record, my dad was a very messy person.
That's like a sign when someone has it that messy like that they're erratic and they have some drug use and it's
yeah, that's something my sister and I talk about because we were like, it is not that hard to be a functioning adult. And we were like, he did not have it together. So we were like, we don't know how he had such a high opinion of himself, like in some ways, because we were like, there were a lot of things he could not keep up with. And that was, our house was filthy all the time.
Of course, there's none of that when your mom,
No,
it's like seeing those two contrasts. I was like, wow.
That's his second wife.
Okay.
That cat is crazy.
And her name is Robin. And I don't know anything else about her. But I know they got divorced in 1981. And then she died mysteriously.
Oh.
Right.
Oh.
She's the one that mysteriously died.
How long
afterwards? Yeah, like a radio fell in the bathtub or something.
What?
Oh, I didn't know that.
And then he had to repeat a year of medical school.
What? We did not know.
He flunked out of medical school.
How long did she die after they divorced?
Soon. I don't know when, but soon. That's the thing, though. This is weird because you cannot find a death certificate. This is all, heavily rumored. Everyone's always said this my entire life. And she was the one wife he wouldn't talk about. He told me all about his first wife. And all he said about the second one was, I went into the army and I came back and she was cheating on me.
Oh, and then she mysteriously died.
And then everyone's like, she died. And no one can find a record of her anywhere.
What?
And so, yeah, because all I've seen is they divorced in December of 1981. Nothing else. She does not exist on the internet.
Weird.
So how many times has he been married?
4 that I know of.
4.
He was engaged quite a few more than that. He was engaged to somebody else when my mom met him.
Oh, okay. But 2 have died, right?
Yes.
Out of the 4. Okay.
2 out of the 4. I know 2 out of the 4 are still living.
Okay.
And not to be this person, but when I went on TikTok, I had people emailing me my dad's birth certificate. I had people emailing me everything they could find about my family online, and they never found this woman.
Really?
And I'm like, that's suspicious.
Where's her kids?
I couldn't tell you. He thinks he is smarter than everyone he's ever met.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course.
I will say I've had a lot of people tell me he was a really great doctor for them. But I'm also like, but were you a young girl?
Yeah.
Well, he wasn't a great doctor for them.
And narcissists are really good at what they do. They're really good.
They're good at
really
hiding who they are.
They are smart, and they can
very
be who
charismatic, very charming, very the whole very manipulative.
You can be who you want to be. They can be who they want to be. So they can be the greatest person at something when they want to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it wouldn't surprise me that he wouldn't act that way to a lot of people, so they would get this persona of him as being this wonderful guy.
Mm-hmm.
So that way people wouldn't believe what he really is.
Yeah.
Right.
And he was...
It worked.
Yeah. And he was convicted, by the way, of that thing that happened to your friend. In June of 2006, he was convicted of that.
In 99, I believe he stopped because he got caught in Terre Haute. He lost his license in Indiana for something completely different.
That
And
checks
it was
out.
for stealing narcotics.
Oh
Oh.
my gosh. There
He
it
got
is.
popped on a drug test. He popped a drug test for narcotics that were stolen.
Oh my gosh.
And he had stolen them. So like he lost his license in Indiana, and that's all he had. And I remember after that, when I was like 10, 11, 12, like, I mean, it was a real, we went from having money to having nothing very quickly, you know, and he was living on disability because he's bipolar. So he got disability.
Oh, wow.
And he was living on our social security checks because our mom died.
Mm-hmm.
So we got social security checks, you know, so we were kind of his way of functioning, but we never had any money. And like, it was a whole thing, but he would always say, well, I just have to go to this special place where I can become a better dad. And I was like, you mean rehab? And he was like, yeah, it's rehab. It's like, then go to rehab, you know, because he's like, I can get my medical license back once I go to rehab. And I was like, then go to rehab. And he was like, it has to be a special rehab.
Oh
and I was
gosh.
like, and he said, it has to be a rehab for doctors.
What? Why?
Because apparently it is very difficult for rehab facilities to actually rehabilitate a doctor with a prescription drug addiction.
Well, that checks out.
They think they know more.
Oh,
yeah, that I could see that.
And so they have special programs in different places in the country for you to actually go and be treated at a different level.
See, and that, again, that just solidifies my questioning of that Darvocet being actually for him. I'm sold on he got it prescribed to her for him.
Yeah, 5th grade, so 2000, he ended up going to one of these places in New Orleans.
Oh, really?
And he ended up going, we lived with our neighbor in Decatur. At this point, we're in Decatur because when he lost all his money, he lost his license. The only thing he had left was that house in Decatur. So we moved there because he'd already paid for it. Yeah, we just lived there. He never left the house. Like, he became kind of a hermit and just did drugs all the time.
Oh my
But
gosh.
he also would like go see prostitutes and stuff during the middle of the day while we were at school. And that's where all his money went and stuff like that. Yeah, it was a thing. We always knew about it. It wasn't a secret. Like, when I was really little, right after my mom died, I woke up one day and my dad wasn't there in the middle of the night. And I went downstairs to look for him and he wasn't there. So I just sat in the living room and turned on the TV. And
With
this is
you
like
guys being so young?
Well, but your sister
Oh,
was
yeah.
probably there, wasn't she?
I mean,
I don't know. I'm guessing she was,
but
but
still,
she
it's his responsibility, not
Well,
not his
no,
sister's.
I know that,
I'm
but I'm just saying, like, if she was like
Yeah, I'm
16
sure she
and watching
was.
y'all, then
Lord have
And
mercy.
he brought one home.
No.
So she walked into the house and just sees this little kid there.
Oh my God.
And she had on like a big coat and nothing on underneath it. And I remember this. And I just looked at her and said, do you want a Diet Coke?
Oh my God. You're so.
so he had a sex addiction on top of all of this.
Yeah, I think he
So
did too.
freaked out.
Yeah.
Oh my, yeah. Oh, 100%. He had a sex addiction.
I did notice there was a lot of depositions in there where he was trying to fight the insurance company because your mom actually had several life insurance policies that the insurance company didn't want to pay out because they thought that it had been ruled a suicide, and they're not going to pay out if it's a suicide, right? But it was not actually ruled as a suicide. It was undetermined.
Right. So he thought he could get the money.
He
but
thought
they
he could
also
get the money.
pay out to somebody who committed the crime.
Right. I did see in one of those depositions where the insurance company basically says, okay, we see that it's undetermined, but we've determined that it's a suicide. If you have information that it's a homicide, you need to let us know. We do understand that would implicate you. So, right. And then his retort.
Yeah, that's really like self-redundant.
I know. But then his retort was literally, I'm going to plead the fifth on discussing my wife's death at this point. And I was like, of course you are. Why wouldn't you?
And those life insurance investigators, they mean business. So if they don't want to give you out the money.
All of the investigating that I gave you guys is from the life insurance people.
Yeah.
Every single piece of paper is from life insurance.
That's
None of it
oh
was
my
from
gosh.
the OSBI. None of it was from every single thing I have is from the insurance company.
They did their due diligence.
No, life insurance
They
companies mean
went
business.
hard.
Oh, yeah.
They went hard.
I've seen them stake
And-
out people before.
Yeah.
It got really close to going to trial,
Yeah.
and he panicked and finally gave the money up.
Yeah.
And the only way that, and the insurance company was very much like, hey, we'll give it to the kids.
Mm-hmm.
We're not giving it to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that in there where it was like, okay, we'll set up a trust for the kids. And there was like a lot of back and forth about that because, of course, he wanted control over all of it because he wanted it.
And eventually they ended up settling on splitting it between the three of us, but he ended up still having access to ours, which is completely against what was ruled, but it happened.
Lord.
Yeah, it was a mess. None of it was had any oversight that it was supposed to have. Yeah,
That's
it
horrible.
was really messy. But the insurance company went hard, and they were the only ones who did. And they are the reason we know a lot of the things we know.
Well, I mean, that's something, you know?
If you read the life insurance policy, as it was written, it said that it will pay out for suicide like 2 years after it was signed.
Right. I saw that.
After February 8th.
But it was like just on the cusp of it.
2 years after she signed, but she
Right.
didn't sign it until March.
Right.
So that was the problem. It was drafted February 8th. So my dad thought 2 years, I can get the money. And that day was when she died.
Yeah. Isn't that odd?
But it was actually like she didn't sign it till 3 weeks later. She just stopped by 3 weeks later, signed the paper.
So he was 3 weeks short.
Yep. And that's what that's the only reason the insurance company even looked into it.
Did he not know that she waited 3 weeks? He just thought it was
He had
done
no
that
idea.
day.
He just thought it was done that day. And like she just hadn't gone in. And, you know, in the 90s, like I just remember like running errands with her and stuff. She was always busy. So like we'd just stop and she'd run in and do something, you know. So I guarantee she just stopped by the office and signed it and left, you know, but I'm sure it slipped her mind. There was a lot going on. So
Well, yeah, and you know, there wasn't cell phones, and you know, there wasn't
No.
social media where you can get electronic, you know, documents. You had to go somewhere
nothing like
physically.
that. You had to physically go somewhere to sign a piece of paper. And like she just didn't make it there until March.
Yeah, I find that very, very suspicious.
There's a deposition where they reveal that to him.
Yeah.
And he's like,
God.
what? Like he had no clue.
Gotcha.
And they're like, "This is why we're fighting you."
Good,
Like, this is
good
it.
for your mother. Good for
Yeah.
your mother, because
Yeah.
that one just forgetting about it was just, you know, back at him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean that. It didn't save her life, but it saved. It gave us something. You know what I mean? It gave it back to her kids at least.
Yeah.
So, but there was a lawyer appointed to us during that trial, like just for the kids.
A
and
guardian
stuff.
ad litem.
Yeah.
Yes, and for our best interests, and he was in contact with my mom's family throughout the process, and he was like, at one point, it was like a week before the trial happened, and he was like, if we prove this in a trial, it will go to criminal court, right? If it's proven in civil court, it will go to criminal court, right?
Yeah.
He's like, but the issue is I could do that and risk it, or I could get the settlement for the kids now. What's in the best interest of the kids?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's like, because obviously everyone at that point believed and knew that he was guilty.
Mm-hmm.
But they were like, which is it better that we know the kids will have the money versus him, or is it better that we risk it? I guess years later it was still tearing him up a little bit because he was just
that's a hard decision.
One of the hardest decisions that he's made as the guardian ad, because he's like, I didn't know what to do, you know. And like, I mean,
Wow.
what do? You know, what do you do? But he did go to my mom's family and be like, I'm sorry, I have to choose it for the kids. And, you know, I keep telling people, I'm like, it wasn't a lot of money. Like, it really wasn't. You know, they split it between the three of us and it went into the stock market and we lost, you know, like 2008 happened, we lost a lot of it. You know, like things happen like that where it's like, in the end, it paid for 2 years of college. So, like, don't get me wrong, that's a lot compared to what a lot of people get.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make up for not having a mother.
Right.
No.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
There's no amount of money that.
No, exactly. And it's not enough to kill yourself over, I guess. That's what I'm trying to say. It wasn't an astronomical amount of money in the end. Now, what he had put her up for was like something like $2 million or something. I think in the end, it ended up being like 330,000 or something split between 3 kids. So, and then after the stock market and all that, we didn't see half of that. You know what I mean? But like in general, I don't think it was a super high amount of money. It wasn't worth him losing his freedom, apparently. So,
And I want to add, he's never been convicted for your mother's
no, he's never even been
death.
tried for it.
Yeah, never been arrested for it. Never
been arrested. It's officially a cold case, and that's where we're at.
Yeah, and it still does not
It's
have.
open.
Yeah, it still doesn't have whether it was homicide or suicide. It's still just hanging out.
It's still an open case.
Yeah.
It's just hanging out. Yeah, and this is something I have to talk about now on a very regular basis, and I put myself in the position to have to talk about it on a regular basis and to answer questions about it, like on a whim. Like I know I spoke about it before, not to you guys, but like maybe even on TikTok. But I mean, I went through the McDonald's drive-through one time to get a Diet Coke, and I got recognized and asked about my mom in a drive-through. So it's like, you know, at this point, I'm like, it can come up from anywhere, and I have to be pretty ready to answer questions about it because I put myself in the position to have to. Like, you know, and I'm fine with that. I really am, because I want it out there, and I know out of everyone in my family, I am the only person with the personality to be able to do this. And I know that, like, my aunt and uncle tried really hard when I was growing up, and nobody listened to them. And it became the thing when I got older and they didn't put this on me, so I don't want to make it sound like that at all, but it was just kind of a matter of fact understanding that, well, they'll listen to the kid. They won't listen to the brother. They won't listen to the sister-in-law. They will listen to the child of the person that was murdered and the person that murdered her. I'm both the victim and the perpetrator's daughter. And it's a very unique position, and they do listen now because they have to, you know, like people listen. And it was out of the kids, like my sisters have other things going on in their lives, you know, and I am in a very unique position to be able to do it. And I have the personality for it where it doesn't get to me in like an outward facing way, the way it gets to them. You know, I can be very matter of fact when I answer questions, and I am a scientist by trade. So I think that is also just how I think. Like I think in facts, and I think in like, this is what happened, and then this is what happened, and then this is what happened. And that's how my brain works. So I do like analytical chemistry engineering. So that's what I do. So like, that's how my brain works. And I think that it just, for me, it's more, the whole situation has become more clinical, which has helped me get people to listen. Because unfortunately, I feel like if I had said everything, if I cried more than I do, if I was more emotional about it, people wouldn't listen as much. And it's just the reality of it, unfortunately. And it shouldn't be that way, but it is. Getting heard after 25 years is really difficult unless you're clear and concise and get your point across very quickly and keep people's attention and
You're right.
you know, do things like that. And that's, yeah. And I've been able to articulate it pretty strongly since I was really little because I've had to in order to be listened to. Certain shows and certain things handle it very incorrectly. And I had a show like contact me, and the way they handled the initial thing was so incorrect and made me so uncomfortable. I was done.
Oh no.
Immediately. That's awful.
Yeah, that's horrible.
And I was like, nope, we're not doing that. And it's like, it's a weird thing because like in the background, my family is very supportive, you know, like, and everyone's like, yeah, like, that's great. Go do this, do that or whatever. And everyone's been super awesome about it. But at the same time, I have felt personally a lot of pressure, and they all know that. Like, because at the end of the day, I'm like, I'm the one who has to.
You're the face of the case.
I have to put my face in front of a camera.
Yeah.
I have to put my voice to it. I have to put my words to it. And at the end, it can be difficult.
Yeah.
And it can be a lot. And they know that. And like, so there have been times where I'm like, I have to slow down, or I have to take a break, or I have to, and everyone's been super supportive, but it still feels like a lot of pressure sometimes, even that I put myself under in order to do it. Because I'm like, if I don't do it, it's never going to get done.
Right. Yeah.
Because nobody else has ever been listened to. And I know that. And I know that nobody else is in a position to stand up like I am.
Well, thank you for being your mom's voice.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you really are. You're her voice. And, you're helping a lot of people through your platform to cope, I think, and to know how to speak up and speak out for, their loved one. And so it's a really big deal. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah. And thanks for being with us today.
Thank
and
you.
Telling your mom's story.
When you guys contacted me, I think I contacted Jamie, and I was like, who are these people?
Oh, Jamie Hyde.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. She's so sweet.
We love her.
She was like, they're great. And I'm like, awesome.
We love her to death.
She's great.
I saw she had done it, and I was like, hey, you've done a podcast. And I was like, and then she was like, nope, they're great. I was like, sweet.
That's awesome.
Yeah, well, I hope we can get someone out there that knows something.
Who knows?
As stranger things have happened.
You've reached the end of our episode. All suspects are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Join Raven next time on the Sirens Podcast.
Do we have an outro? That's our outro, isn't it?